My son's fiancée turned to her parents and said in Mandarin, "This old pig doesn't understand a thing. So stupid." She thought I was some fool who couldn't understand her. I understood every word, but I chose to stay silent and watch how far their little performance would go. What I heard next made me realize I had to protect my son from the most dangerous person he's ever met. Before I tell you what happened at that dinner table, let me know in the comments. Where are you watching this from? The aroma of pot roast filled my Arlington home that Friday evening. At 66, I'd perfected this recipe over decades of cooking for my late wife Sarah and our son Benjamin. Tonight felt different tonight. I was meeting the woman my boy claimed he wanted to marry. A Chinese-American woman named Grace Zhang, along with her parents who'd immigrated from Beijing years ago. What Benjamin didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd spent 15 years in military intelligence, much of it focused on Chinese communications. My Mandarin was as sharp as my English, a skill I'd kept classified even from my own family. "Dad, they're here." Benjamin's excitement was infectious as I opened the door to Grace and her parents. She stood there like something from a magazine, perfectly polished, with a practiced smile. "Mr. Thorne, thank you so much for having us," Grace said, handing me a potted orchid. "Your home is absolutely lovely. Benjamin talks about you constantly. He adores you." Behind her, Thomas and Elizabeth Zhang nodded with formal courtesy that reminded me of diplomatic functions from my army days. "Please call me Gideon," I replied, stepping aside, "and thank you. Sarah always loved orchids." Benjamin practically glowed as he guided Grace through our living room. "Grace teaches piano at the community center, Dad, and she volunteers at the animal shelter every weekend." "How wonderful," I said, genuinely impressed. "What kind of music do you prefer teaching?" "Oh, classical mostly," Grace replied, her eyes lighting up. "Chopin, Debussy. Though I do enjoy teaching children popular songs. It keeps them engaged, you know." Dinner started beautifully. The pot roast was tender, conversation flowed easily. Thomas asked about my electronics repair shop. Elizabeth complimented the green bean casserole. Grace hung on Benjamin's every word about their wedding plans. "We're thinking spring," Benjamin said, cutting into his roast. "Maybe April. Grace wants cherry blossoms in the photos." "That sounds perfect, son," I said, raising my wine glass. "To new beginnings." Everything changed during dessert. Grace leaned toward her parents and switched to Mandarin. Her voice dropped to what she thought was a whisper, but my trained ears caught every word. What I heard made my blood run cold. She called me an old pig who didn't understand anything, said I looked stupid and would be an easy target. Then with a dismissive laugh, she told her parents, "Keep doing well, just continue like this." The casual cruelty in her voice, the way she spoke to them like employees receiving instructions rather than beloved parents, it hit me like a physical blow. My grip tightened on my coffee cup. Adrenaline surged through my veins, the same feeling I'd had in combat situations. Every instinct screamed at me to stand up and confront her right there. But decades of intelligence work had taught me patience. I forced my face to remain neutral, even managed to smile when Grace looked my way. "The pie is delicious, Mr. Thorne," Grace said in English, switching back to that honey-sweet voice. "You simply must give me the recipe. I'd love to make this for Benjamin." "Of course, dear," I replied, my voice steady despite the fury building inside. "Sarah would have loved to share it with you." As the evening wound down, I played the gracious host. I thanked them for coming, accepted their compliments, promised to have them back soon. Benjamin walked them to their car, completely oblivious to what had transpired at his father's table. When he returned, his face flushed with happiness. "Dad, thank you. This means everything to me. I can tell you really like her." I nodded and squeezed his shoulder, not trusting myself to speak. As I watched him drive away, I stood in my doorway, the cool October air clearing my head. She thought I was a fool. She had no idea I understood every single word. The smell of old electronics and WD-40 filled my workshop behind the house, mixing with the October morning air drifting through the open garage door. I'd been tinkering with this vintage Zenith radio for the better part of an hour, but my hands moved on autopilot. Sleep had been elusive all week. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Grace's voice again. "Old pig, stupid, easy target." The words echoed in my head like a broken record, each repetition stoking the fire of anger I'd been trying to contain. 30 years of marriage to Sarah had taught me patience, but this was different. This was my son's future at stake. The crunch of gravel in the driveway interrupted my brooding. Benjamin's Honda pulled up, and I watched through the window as he grabbed 2 coffee cups from the passenger seat. My boy always was thoughtful, took after his mother that way. "Morning, Dad," he called out, ducking under the half-raised garage door. His face carried that same glow it had worn all week. "Thought you might need some caffeine. You look tired." "Thanks, son." I accepted the steaming cup gratefully. "Just been working on this old radio. Mrs. Henderson's grandfather's. She wants it restored for her daughter." Benjamin perched on my workbench, careful not to disturb the scattered components. "Grace loved meeting you last week. She keeps asking when we can come back for dinner." The mention of her name sent a familiar jolt of irritation through me, but I kept my voice level. "She seems very fond of you." "She is?" His smile widened. "Dad, I've never felt like this before. She makes me want to be better, you know. Her parents are wonderful too, so traditional, so respectful. They remind me of Grandpa Chen from down the street when I was little." I set down my coffee cup, choosing my words carefully. "Son, sometimes people aren't who they appear to be." The change in Benjamin's expression was immediate. His shoulders stiffened, and that easy smile faded. "What do you mean by that?" "I just think you should take your time. Get to know them better before making any big decisions." "Dad, you're being unreasonable." The words came out sharper than I'd expected. "You barely gave her a chance. She was nothing but polite and gracious, and you're already finding fault." I tried a different approach. "It's not about fault, Benjamin. It's about being careful. In the service, we learn to trust our instincts." "Your instincts?" He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his coffee. "Or your prejudices? Is this because she's Chinese? Because that's what this sounds like to me." The accusation hit like a slap. "That's not fair, and you know it." "Do I?" Benjamin's voice cracked with disappointment. "Grace warned me this might happen. She said some people have trouble accepting interracial relationships, even family." Grace warned him. The manipulation was so smooth, so calculated, it took my breath away. She'd planted seeds of doubt about me before I'd even said a word. "Son, that's not what this is about." "Then what is it about, Dad?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've already made up your mind about the woman I love." He headed for the door, then turned back, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I thought you'd want me to be happy. Mom would have supported me. She would have given Grace a real chance." The garage door slammed behind him, leaving me alone with the smell of motor oil and my own regrets. Through the window, I watched his car disappear down the street, taking with it any hope of an easy solution. I picked up the radio again, my hands steadier now, despite the turmoil in my chest. Sarah's picture smiled at me from the workbench. My compass for 35 years of marriage silent now when I needed her wisdom most. But I knew what she'd say. She'd tell me to protect our boy, no matter the cost. If words wouldn't convince him, evidence would, and I knew exactly who to call. 3 sleepless nights had passed since Benjamin stormed out of my workshop. I'd spent those dark hours staring at the ceiling, weighing my options, and mentally cataloging contacts from my Army intelligence days. Most were retired, now scattered across the country, but a few still worked in government positions where they might prove useful. Maria Santos topped that list. We'd served together in the 80s, back when intelligence work meant more shoe leather than computer screens. She'd been sharp then, the kind of analyst who could spot patterns others missed. And according to LinkedIn, she now worked for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. If anyone could help me dig into Grace Zhang's background quietly, it would be Maria. Murphy's Cafe sat just off Route 1, close enough to the Pentagon to attract the lunch crowd of contractors and government workers. I arrived early, claiming a corner booth where we could talk without being overheard. The familiar weight of conducting clandestine business settled over me like an old coat. Maria walked in at exactly 11:30, her silver hair shorter than I remembered, but her posture still military straight. She spotted me immediately. Old habits die hard in our line of work. "Gideon Thorne," she said, sliding into the booth opposite me. "When I got your call, I thought someone was playing a prank. 30 years and suddenly you need a favor." "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, Maria. It's about Benjamin." Her expression softened. She'd attended Benjamin's high school graduation, sent cards every Christmas. In the intelligence community, work relationships often became family bonds. "What's wrong? Is he in trouble?" "Not yet, but I think he might be." I pulled out my phone, showing her the photos Benjamin had shared from his dinner dates with Grace. "He's engaged to this woman, Grace Zhang. Something feels off about her and her family." Maria studied the images, her trained eyes taking in details I'd probably missed. "What kind of off?" I chose my words carefully. "Inconsistencies in their behavior. The way they interact doesn't feel natural, more like they're performing roles than being themselves. And some things they've said. I paused, unable to reveal my linguistic advantage. My instincts are screaming that something's wrong. Your instincts were always solid, Maria said, handing back the phone. What do you need? Background checks on all three of them. Grace Zhang Thomas and Elizabeth Zhang. They claim to be from Beijing originally, but now live in Fairfax. I need to know if they are who they say they are. Maria nodded slowly. Immigration status, employment history, family connections, the full workup. I can run them through our databases, cross-reference with State Department records. It'll take a few days to be thorough. I slid a piece of paper across the table with their basic information names. Approximate ages, the address Benjamin had given me. I've got photos, social media profiles, anything else you might need. This stays between us, Maria said, pocketing the paper. If I find something and it goes legal, you didn't hear it from me first. Understood. She studied my face for a long moment. Gideon, I've seen you handle dangerous situations with ice in your veins. Right now you look like a man who's genuinely worried. What aren't you telling me? I met her gaze steadily. That my son is head over heels, in love with someone who might be using him. And if I'm right, it's going to destroy him. Maria's expression grew serious. I'll start running the checks this afternoon. Give me 72 hours. We shook hands outside the cafe, and I watched her disappear into the Pentagon City metro station. For the first time in days, I felt like I was taking action instead of just reacting. The next 2 days crawled by. I threw myself into repair work, fixing radios and televisions with an intensity that surprised my customers. Grace visited Benjamin twice during that period, and I forced myself to be cordial when they stopped by the shop. She played her role perfectly, the devoted fiancée meeting her future father-in-law's friends, asking about family photos, complimenting my work. But I watched her more carefully now, looking for cracks in the facade. They were there, subtle but present, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes, how she steered conversations away from specific details about her past, the practiced quality of her responses to personal questions. On Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Maria. We need to talk. It's not good. My hands were steady as I called her back, but my heart was racing. Maria's voice was grim when she called. Gideon, you were right to be suspicious. Maria's call came at 7:30 Friday morning, jarring me from the first decent sleep I'd managed all week. We need to meet immediately, she said without preamble. Not Murphy's, somewhere more private. The parking garage behind the Marriott on Jefferson Davis Highway. The urgency in her voice sent adrenaline coursing through my system. Level 3 northwest corner, 20 minutes. She was waiting by her sedan when I arrived, a thick manila folder tucked under her arm. Her face carried the grim expression I remembered from briefings that had gone sideways. Get in, she said, sliding into my truck. We need to talk where no one can overhear us. Maria opened the folder, revealing documents and photographs that made my stomach clench. Gideon, your instincts were dead on. Grace Zhang isn't who she claims to be. She handed me an ICE database search result. Her real name is Xu Min. Grace Zhang is a fabricated identity she's been using for 8 months. The photograph showed the same face I'd seen across my dinner table, but the name beneath was completely different. How? Identity theft. The real Grace Zhang died in a car accident in California last year. Somehow Xu Min obtained her documents and assumed her identity. The next revelation hit harder. Maria showed me printouts from Arlington Community Theater's website, headshots for Thomas Thompson and Elizabeth Miller, listed under Cultural Family Package. Ideal for ceremonies, community events, and immigration photos. They're not her parents. I said the words feeling surreal. Professional actors. We contacted them. They admitted being hired by Xu Min for $500 each to play her parents. The engagement photos Benjamin showed me. Rental studio in San Francisco, same backdrop we found in 4 other sample portfolios online. She's done this before, Gideon. The final revelation was devastating. Maria handed me a marriage certificate translated from Chinese. Xu Min is currently married to Liu Wei in Guangzhou, China. 3 years legally valid. She never divorced him. I stared at the document. Marriage fraud, among other things. Immigration fraud identity, theft, conspiracy, federal crime territory. If she marries Benjamin, she could face 10 years in prison and permanent deportation. And Benjamin, if he's truly unaware he's a victim. But if authorities think he's complicit... Maria's expression was grave. He could face charges, too. I organized the documents with military precision. The evidence painted a picture of calculated deception that made my blood run cold. What's our next move? Officially, I report this to my supervisors. This suggests a larger operation. Maria paused. Unofficially, you need to protect Benjamin. Get him away from her before this explodes. He won't listen. He thinks I'm prejudiced. Then you need proof he can't ignore. Maria gathered the documents. I can give you copies, but once this goes official, it moves fast. Federal prosecutors don't mess around with immigration fraud. I accepted the folder, its weight feeling heavier than it should. How long do we have? Maybe a week before the investigation becomes official. Maria prepared to leave, placing a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, Gideon. I know this isn't what you wanted to find. She was right. Part of me had hoped my suspicions were wrong, that Grace was simply a young woman with poor social skills or cultural differences I'd misinterpreted. But the evidence was irrefutable. Looking at the documents spread across the table, I realized this was bigger than I thought. Maria's contact at the FBI worked faster than I'd expected. By Monday afternoon, I was sitting in a sterile conference room at the Washington field office, facing Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, across a metal table covered with the evidence Maria had compiled. Agent Walsh was younger than I'd anticipated, maybe early 40s, with sharp eyes, and the kind of focused intensity that reminded me of my best intelligence officers. She'd spent the better part of an hour reviewing every document, asking pointed questions about timeline and verification procedures. Mr. Thorne, she said, finally closing the folder, this is impressive work. Immigration fraud cases usually take months to develop this kind of comprehensive evidence. Maria Santos is thorough, I replied. Always was. The question now is how we proceed. Walsh leaned back in her chair. We have enough to arrest Shu Min on identity theft and immigration fraud charges, but I'd prefer to build a stronger case. These organized operations usually involve multiple victims. What do you need? Ideally, we'd like her to incriminate herself further, maybe reveal information about how she obtained the false documents, whether she's working with others. Walsh studied me carefully. You mentioned she's comfortable in your home. Would you be willing to participate in a controlled operation? The weight of what she was asking settled over me. You want me to invite her back for dinner? With full FBI surveillance and support, we'd wire your home, have agents positioned nearby. If she says anything incriminating, we'd have it on record. I thought about Benjamin's face when he'd stormed out of my workshop, the pain in his voice when he'd accused me of prejudice. My son would have to be there. He's completely unaware of what she really is. That might work in our favor. If she believes you've accepted her, she may be more careless about what she says. Walsh's expression softened slightly. I understand this puts you in a difficult position with your family. Agent Walsh, my son is planning to marry a woman who's already married to someone else. She's using him to commit federal crimes. Any difficulty with family is secondary to protecting him. She nodded approvingly. How would you approach this? I'd been thinking about that since leaving the parking garage Friday morning. I'll tell Benjamin I've reconsidered, that maybe I was too hasty in my judgment. He's been wanting us to have dinner again. He'll jump at the chance to arrange it. And Grace, she'll come. She thinks she's won, that she successfully turned my son against me. She won't be able to resist the opportunity to solidify her victory. Agent Walsh opened a legal pad and began taking notes. We'll need at least 48 hours to set up surveillance equipment. Can you arrange the dinner for Friday evening? I'll call Benjamin today. Mr. Thorne, I need you to understand what you're agreeing to. Once we activate this operation, there's no going back. If Shu Min incriminates herself, we'll arrest her that night. Your son will witness his fiancée being taken into federal custody. The image hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my voice steady. Better he sees the truth now than discovers it after they're married. 2 hours later, I was back in my workshop staring at Benjamin's number on my phone. The conversation would require every ounce of acting ability I possessed. He answered on the second ring. Dad, Benjamin, I owe you an apology. The words came easier than I'd expected. I've been thinking about our conversation, and you're right. I didn't give Grace a fair chance. The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Dad, are you serious? I'd like to invite her and her parents back for dinner. Friday night, if they're available. I want to start over. Wow. Yes, absolutely. Grace will be thrilled. She's been worried that you don't like her. Tell her I'm looking forward to getting to know her better. After Benjamin hung up, I sat in the gathering dusk of my workshop, surrounded by the familiar smell of electronics and motor oil. In 3 days, I would sit across from Grace Zhang or Schumann or whoever she really was and watch federal agents destroy the elaborate lie she'd built around my son's heart. As I set the table for Friday's dinner, I wondered if Grace suspected anything. Friday evening arrived with the crisp clarity of an October night. Grace and her parents appeared at my door at exactly 6:30, punctual as always. She carried a bouquet of white roses. Thomas wore a fresh-pressed suit, and Elizabeth had brought homemade cookies in a decorative tin. "Mr. Thorne, thank you so much for this second chance." Grace said, her smile radiant with what looked like genuine warmth. "I know Benjamin means the world to you. Please come in," I replied, accepting the flowers. The wire taped to my chest felt heavy beneath my shirt, but my voice remained steady. "I'm looking forward to getting to know you better." Benjamin practically glowed as he helped them with their coats. The relief on his face was almost unbearable. My son truly believed we were healing our family rift. Dinner progressed smoothly. I'd prepared the same menu as our first meeting: pot roast mashed potatoes, green beans. Grace complimented every dish, asked thoughtful questions about my electronics shop, and shared charming stories about her piano students. Her performance was flawless. "This is exactly how I imagined family dinners would be," she said, squeezing Benjamin's hand. "You're so lucky to have such a thoughtful father." But I caught the subtle probing beneath her words. "You seem much more relaxed tonight, Mr. Thorne. I was worried after our first meeting that I'd somehow offended you." "Not at all," I assured her. "Sometimes first impressions can be misleading." As we moved to dessert apple pie again, I felt the familiar weight of approaching action. Agent Walsh would be positioned outside waiting for my signal. "Grace," I said, setting down my coffee cup, "I've been thinking about our first dinner together." She tilted her head, suddenly cautious. "Oh, I hope it was pleasant for you." I switched to Mandarin without warning. "Did you really think I couldn't understand?" The change in Grace was instantaneous. Her face drained of color, her hand froze halfway to her mouth. What did you just say?" "You called me an old pig, said I was stupid and an easy target." Benjamin's fork clattered against his plate. "Dad, wait. You speak Mandarin. How do you know what she said?" "That's because Grace isn't her real name." I kept my voice level, professional. "Her real name is Shu Min." "Benjamin, he's lying." Grace's composure cracked, desperation bleeding through. "Don't listen to him. She's already married," I continued. "Has been for 3 years. To a man named Liu Wei in Guangzhou." Thomas shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly. "This is insane. We're leaving right now." "Sit down, Mr. Thompson," I said calmly. "Arlington Community Theater. Write $500 each to play loving parents." Benjamin's voice came out broken. "Dad, you speak Chinese. Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Military intelligence, son. I learned it 30 years ago." I watched his world crumble in real time. "I've been investigating your fiancé for 2 weeks. Grace grabbed Benjamin's arm frantically. "Please, he's trying to destroy us because he's jealous. He can't stand that you love someone more than him." The doorbell rang at exactly 8 p.m. Agent Walsh entered with 2 backup agents, their badges clearly visible. The professionalism of their entrance was both reassuring and terrifying. "I'm our Shu Mim," Agent Walsh said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "You're under federal investigation for immigration fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy." Grace's scream pierced the air. "This is entrapment! You set me up!" "Yes," I said quietly, "I did." Elizabeth collapsed into her chair, tears streaming. "We're just actors. She paid us $500 each. We didn't know it was illegal." Grace whirled on me, her mask finally falling away completely. "You think you've won, old man?" "I think I've protected my son." Benjamin sat in stunned silence, then whispered, "Grace, was any of it real?" She tried to run, then bolting toward the kitchen door, but Agent Walsh's backup was waiting. The handcuffs clicked with mechanical precision as they read her rights. Grace cursed in rapid Mandarin words I understood but wouldn't repeat. Benjamin remained motionless in his chair, hands shaking, staring at the empty space where his future had been sitting moments before. As the FBI car pulled away, Benjamin looked at me with eyes I'd never seen before. The silence that followed the FBI car's departure was deafening. Benjamin sat motionless at the dining table, staring at the empty chairs, where Grace and her fake parents had been sitting moments before. The untouched apple pie sat between us like evidence of a life that had just been shattered. I cleared my throat gently. "Son, don't." His voice was barely a whisper. "Just don't. Not yet." I walked to my study and returned with the manila folder Maria had given me. The weight of it seemed heavier now, loaded with the destruction it had caused. I set it carefully in front of Benjamin. "This is everything we found," I said quietly. Her real name, the fake parents, the marriage certificate from China. I wanted to show you before, but I wouldn't have listened. Benjamin's hands trembled as he opened the folder. His eyes moved across the documents, the actor profiles, the marriage certificate, the identity theft evidence. Each page seemed to hit him like a physical blow. "How long have you known?" he asked, finally not looking up from the papers. "I suspected something the first night. I've been investigating for 2 weeks. 2 weeks." He laughed bitterly. 2 weeks while I was planning a wedding to someone who doesn't even exist. His phone buzzed a text message. Benjamin glanced at it and his face crumpled. "It's from her number. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I did love you." Even now, she's still lying. I reached across the table, but he pulled back. "I need some time, Dad. I need to process this." That was Friday night. Saturday and Sunday passed without a word from Benjamin. I threw myself into repair work, fixing a vintage television for Mrs. Chen and rewiring a radio that had belonged to someone's grandfather. My hands stayed busy, but my mind raced with worry that I'd lost my son along with his fiancée. Agent Walsh called Sunday evening with updates. Grace Shu Min had confessed to everything in exchange for avoiding additional charges. The fake parents were cooperating, fully providing information about how she'd recruited them. Deportation proceedings would begin within the week. "Your son's not in any legal trouble," Walsh assured me. "He was clearly a victim in this." Monday night brought no call. Tuesday stretched endlessly. By Wednesday, I was convinced I'd traded my son's safety for his love, and the price felt too high. Then at 11:47 p.m. my phone rang. "Dad." Benjamin's voice was thick with emotion, barely controlled. "I'm here, son. I've been thinking for 3 days straight, and I keep coming back to the same thing." He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. "I defended her against you. I chose a stranger over my own father." "Benjamin, no, let me finish. You were protecting me, and I made you the villain. I called you paranoid. I accused you of prejudice. I threw Mom's memory at you like a weapon." His voice cracked completely. "How do you forgive someone who is so blind?" The pain in his voice nearly broke me. Son, loving someone isn't blindness. It's hope. It's the willingness to believe the best in people. That's not a flaw, that's who you are, and it's one of the things I'm most proud of. But I should have listened to you. Maybe, but if I'd been wrong, you'd have spent your life wondering if you gave up happiness because your old man couldn't let go. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Trust has to be earned back, I know that. But love doesn't disappear because of mistakes. The silence stretched between us filled with 30 years of father-son history. "Can I come over tomorrow?" he asked finally. "I want to understand everything. How you knew what you felt, how you managed to save me from myself. Of course, I'll make coffee. The good stuff. The good stuff." After he hung up, I sat in my kitchen looking at Sarah's picture on the windowsill. Our boy was coming home. The next evening, Benjamin arrived with takeout Chinese food, a gesture that would have been impossible a week ago. We spread the evidence across the dining table, and I walked him through every step of the investigation. He asked hard questions, and I gave honest answers. As we finished the lo mein, Benjamin leaned back in his chair and studied me with new eyes. "Dad, I need to ask you something. How did you stay so calm through all this?" 3 weeks had passed since that Friday night dinner. The legal proceedings moved with federal efficiency. Grace had been deported with a 10-year ban, while the fake parents received community service and hefty fines. The bell above my shop door chimed as Mrs. Patterson brought in her ancient television. "Same fuzzy problem," I diagnosed, already reaching for my tools. As I worked, I found myself thinking about Benjamin's question from the night before. How had I stayed calm? The answer had something to do with experience, knowing that panic clouds judgment and clear thinking saves lives. Benjamin walked in carrying coffee and lunch from Murphy's Deli. These visits had become routine over the past week, comfortable rituals that reminded me of when he was 12. "How's work going?" I asked. "Good. Actually great." He paused thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about what you said about trusting instincts. There's this new project manager, and something about her felt rehearsed. What did you do?" I asked more questions, dug deeper into her references. Turns out her last 3 jobs ended under questionable circumstances. Benjamin smiled. 6 months ago, I would have ignored that feeling. The pride I felt was overwhelming. Benjamin wasn't becoming cynical, he was becoming wise. A young man entered carrying a vintage radio. Someone said, "You might fix this." It belonged to my grandfather. I examined it carefully. "It'll take some work, but yes, might take a week." He hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask you something? My girlfriend wants to move in together, but something feels rushed. She's pushing hard, and I can't shake the feeling I'm missing something." Benjamin and I exchanged a look. "Trust that feeling," I said gently. "When someone's rushing you toward a big decision, ask yourself why the timing matters so much to them." After he left, Benjamin shook his head. "Does this happen often, relationship advice, in an electronics shop?" "More than you'd think. Some kinds of knowledge only come from living through things." We worked together for the next hour, Benjamin helping with inventory, while I shared stories from my Army days lessons about reading people, trusting teammates, making decisions under pressure. As afternoon wound down, Benjamin prepared to leave. At the door, he turned back. "Dad, thank you. Not just for saving me from Grace, but for showing me what it looks like to protect someone without controlling them." After he drove away, I stood watching his taillights disappear. The October air carried the scent of burning leaves and distant sounds of children playing. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds. Inside, I walked to Sarah's photograph on the kitchen windowsill. "Our boy is safe now," I told her picture, "and he's stronger for having gone through it." A father's instincts never retire. We see dangers our children can't, and love them enough to act on it. Sometimes that means letting them make mistakes, and sometimes it means stepping in when the stakes are too high. The trick is knowing the difference. I turned off the shop lights, already looking forward to Sunday dinner with Benjamin. Next time someone tried to deceive him, he'd know what to look for. Looking back on this journey, I realized that betrayal stories like mine aren't just about deception, they're about the strength we find when everything we thought we knew crumbles around us. This true story taught me that a father's love isn't measured by how much we trust, but by how far we'll go to protect what matters most. God gave us instincts for a reason. When something feels wrong, when the pieces don't quite fit, that's not paranoia. That's divine wisdom whispering through experience. I've learned that the Lord works through the skills we've gained, the people we've known, and even the sleepless nights that force us to act. The hardest lesson, sometimes protecting someone means becoming the villain in their story, at least temporarily. Benjamin hated me for weeks, but God knew what I couldn't see then, that our relationship would emerge stronger, built on truth instead of comfortable lies. These betrayal stories remind us that evil often wears a beautiful mask. Grace's deception was masterful, but the Almighty equipped me with everything I needed to see through it. Military training, loyal friends like Maria, and most importantly, a father's unshakable love. This true story changed both Benjamin and me. He's more careful now, but not cynical. He's learned to trust his instincts while keeping his heart open. As for me, I've discovered that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to let someone you care about destroy themselves even when they beg you to step aside. The truth is, we're all vulnerable to deception when we want something badly enough. But God places people in our lives, parents, friends, mentors, who can see what we cannot. The wise person listens. The foolish one pushes them away. Every father reading this knows the weight of protecting their children from dangers they can't see. It's a sacred responsibility that doesn't end when they turn 18 or get engaged or start their own lives. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love? Share this video with parents who understand that love sometimes means saying the hard things. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about family courage and the wisdom that comes from never giving up on the people who matter most. I'll never forget the morning my daughter looked me straight in the eye and said, "I don't need an old loser to walk me down the aisle." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had given up everything for her. My dreams, my pride, 20 years of my life. I could only nod silently, though my heart was breaking. But what I didn't tell her was that I had secretly delivered a letter to the priest. When the priest read the letter I had written, her entire world would come crashing down. Tell us in the comments, what city are you watching from this father's heartbreak? Could happen anywhere. The late afternoon sun streamed through my workshop windows, casting shadows across the wooden table I'd been restoring. This wasn't just any table. It was where Maya had done homework for 12 years, blown out birthday candles, shared meals after her mother passed. The oak surface bore gentle scars of family life, ring stains, tiny scratches, a small burn mark from when she'd tried wood burning at age 10. I was sanding the worn edges when her car pulled into the driveway. Maya rarely visited weekends anymore, not since Jason. Her heels clicked on the porch. Dad, that tone I'd learned to recognize. She had something difficult to say. "In here, sweetheart," I called, setting down my sandpaper. She appeared in the doorway, polished and put together in expensive clothes that screamed sophistication. "We need to talk," she said, not moving from the threshold. "It's about the wedding." My heart lifted. Maybe she'd changed her mind about Jason's small ceremony. But then she spoke words that would echo for weeks. "Dad, you're not the kind of father I want walking me down the aisle." The sandpaper slipped from my fingers, hitting concrete with a soft thud. I stared, certain I'd misheard. "What did you just say?" "You heard me. Matter of fact, like discussing weather. Jason's family is different. They're successful, educated, sophisticated. His father built Sterling Corporation from nothing. His friends are doctors, lawyers, executives." Each word felt like a physical blow. "Maya, I don't understand." "Look around, Dad." She gestured at my workshop flannel shirt work boots. "This isn't the world I'm marrying into. Jason's wedding will be elegant, refined. I can't have you there looking like—" She paused, searching for less cruel words. "Like this." 24 years of raising her alone, working double shifts for her college, being both father and mother. And this was how she saw me. An embarrassment. "I see," I whispered. "It's nothing personal. I need everything perfect. Jason's family has standards, and I need to fit in now. Surely you understand." I wanted to argue a reminder of all the times I'd been there. Instead, I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Good. I knew you'd understand." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Dad, maybe think about what you want to do with the rest of your life, now that I won't need you anymore." Her heels faded as she walked away. Car engines started, then silence. I sank onto the old stool, surrounded by furniture I'd crafted with love. The bookshelf for her 16th birthday jewelry box for graduation. The hope chest I'd been secretly working on for her future home. Each piece represented hours of devotion, dreams of family legacy. But sitting in the gathering dusk, surrounded by remnants of a father's love, I felt as if everything I'd ever been had just walked out that door. The workshop fell silent except for the old clock ticking on the wall. The same clock that had marked every moment of her childhood, every bedtime story, every scraped knee I'd bandaged. Now it seemed to count down to nothing. I picked up the sandpaper with trembling hands, then set it down again. What was the point of restoring anything when the person you'd built your whole world around no longer wanted you in hers? Outside, the sun was setting over Millbrook, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. But inside my workshop, surrounded by the furniture that told the story of our life together, I felt nothing but the cold emptiness of a father who had somehow become expendable. 3 a.m, and sleep remained elusive. I lay staring at the ceiling, Maya's words on repeat. "You're not the kind of father I want." The digital clock's red numbers mocked each passing minute. Rolling out of bed, I padded to the living room. The house felt like a mausoleum of memories. For 24 years, this place had been filled with Maya's presence. Now drowning in rejection, I needed something to remind me I'd once been loved. The old cedar chest in the corner beckoned. Anne had insisted we buy it when Maya was born. "For keeping precious things," she'd said. I hadn't opened it in years, afraid of ghosts. Inside photo albums chronicled Maya's journey from infant to graduate. Page after page revealed forgotten moments, first steps, gap-toothed grins, father-daughter dances where she'd stand on my feet. Beneath the albums, my fingers found a small wooden box. Inside, tied with faded ribbon, were letters in Anne's handwriting. I'd discovered these after her funeral, but reading them had been too painful then. Now, with Maya's rejection fresh, I felt compelled to revisit this old heartbreak. "My dearest Paul," the first letter began, dated 3 years before Anne's death. I can't stop thinking about yesterday. When you held me, I felt alive for the first time in years. I know this is wrong. Wade doesn't deserve this betrayal, but I can't help how I feel. I'd read these before, but tonight, different details struck me. Your vision for Sterling Corp is inspiring. You make me believe in possibilities I never imagined. Sterling Corp, the name hit like a physical blow, though I couldn't place why. I dream of the life we could have together. When you talk about expanding Sterling Corp to other cities, I imagine starting fresh somewhere new, just you and me. Another letter months later. Paul, I'm drowning in guilt. Last night, Wade made Maya a dollhouse, spending hours in his workshop, and all I could think about was destroying this family. Sterling Corp's success means nothing if it costs my soul. We have to end this. There it was again. Sterling Corp. Why did that name send chills down my spine? A final letter, Anne's last. Paul, I can't continue living this lie. Wade suspects something. I see it in his eyes. I've decided to end our relationship. Please don't contact me again. What we had was beautiful, but it's destroying everything good in my life. Take care of yourself, and may Sterling Corp bring you the success you deserve. I set the letters aside, pressing palms against my temples. Sterling. Sterling. Where had I heard that name recently? The memory danced at consciousness's edge like catching smoke. Something about Sterling Corp, something recent, something important. Paul Sterling had stolen my wife's heart years ago. But why did his name feel relevant to my current pain? Why did Sterling Corp echo in my mind like an unfinished melody? I clutched Anne's final letter, staring at the name that seemed to pulse on the page. The grandfather clock chimed 4 times, its deep voice filling the silence. Outside, Millbrook slept peacefully, unaware that in this small house, a father was discovering that some ghosts refuse to stay buried, and some names carry more weight than we realize. I sat in Anne's rocking chair as dawn crept through windows, her letters scattered across my lap. Sterling. The name echoed in my skull, demanding recognition I couldn't grasp. Where had I heard it recently? Not from Anne's letters. This was something else, something that made my stomach clench. I closed my eyes, forcing my mind backward through recent conversations. Sterling Corp. Sterling family. Then it hit me like a freight train. Nice to meet you, sir. I'm Jason Sterling. The memory crashed over me. 3 years ago, Maya had brought him home for Sunday dinner. This polished young man who looked like he'd stepped from a magazine. Dad, I want you to meet Jason Sterling. He'd extended his hand with that practiced smile that never reached his eyes. Everything screamed success. Expensive watch, tailored clothes, confident posture of someone who'd never known want. Sterling, that's an interesting name. Family name. My father built Sterling Corporation from the ground up. Real estate development, mostly. He passed when I was young, but the company's still thriving. Sterling Corporation. The same company Anne had mentioned in her letters. The same company that had inspired her dreams of escape. My hands trembled as implications crashed down. Paul Sterling had been Jason's father. The man who'd stolen my wife's heart, filled her head with dreams of a different life. That man had been Jason's father. This couldn't be coincidence. In a country of 300 million people, what were the odds my daughter would randomly fall in love with the son of the man who destroyed my marriage? The timeline made sickening sense. Paul had died 15 years ago. Maya had mentioned Jason lost his father young. If Jason was 28 now, he would have been 13 when his father passed. The affair had ended 20 years ago when Anne got sick. Jason would have been 8 then. It all fit, every horrible piece. But there was something else that made my blood run cold. I remembered that first dinner, how Jason had looked at me. Not with nervous respect of a young man meeting his girlfriend's father, but with something calculating. Like he was studying me, measuring me against some internal standard. The questions he'd asked seemed like polite conversation then, but now felt different. He'd wanted to know about my work, how long I'd lived in Millbrook, about Maya's childhood. He'd been particularly interested in Anne's death. Maya tells me her mother passed when she was young. That must have been difficult, raising a daughter alone. At the time, I'd appreciated his sympathy. Now I wondered if he'd already known the answer before asking. If Jason was Paul Sterling's son, if he knew about the affair, then what was he doing with Maya? Was this twisted revenge? Was he using my daughter to get back at me for something his father had done? The morning sun illuminated scattered letters on the floor. Somewhere in this quiet Ohio town, my daughter was planning a wedding to a man whose father had once tried to steal her mother away. And I was the only one who knew the truth. The grandfather clock chimed 7 times. Outside, Millbrook was waking up unaware that in this small house, a father had discovered the past, had found a way to reach into the present, with claws sharp enough to tear apart everything he'd tried to build. By 8 in the morning, I sat at my old desktop computer. Anne's letters spread beside me like evidence. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Sterling Corporation. If Jason's father had built this company, there would be records to confirm my suspicions. The first search yielded immediate results. Paul Sterling's obituary from 15 years ago showed a handsome man with Jason's same calculating eyes. Survived by his son, Jason Sterling, age 13. The timeline was perfect. Too perfect for coincidence. I dug deeper, finding business articles chronicling Paul's rise. One piece from 22 years ago caught my attention. Sterling Corp expands into Ohio markets. The article mentioned Paul's frequent business trips to smaller Ohio towns, including Millbrook, developing relationships with local contractors like me. Another article from 20 years ago detailed Sterling Corp's sudden withdrawal from Ohio markets following Paul's personal health concerns. The timing matched exactly when Anne had ended their affair. But the final article made my blood run cold. Published months before Paul's death, it described his bitter divorce and custody battle. The article quoted Paul saying he was determined to protect his son from those who had wronged the Sterling family. Those who had wronged the Sterling family. Had Paul told Jason about the affair? Had he painted me as the villain? The phone rang. Maya's number flashed on screen. "Hi, sweetheart," I managed. "Dad, I wanted to make sure you understood about yesterday. Jason helped me realize that sometimes we make difficult choices for our future happiness." Jason helped her realize. Even now, he was shaping her thoughts. Jason says it shows maturity when we put aside childish attachments and focus on what really matters. Childish attachments. 24 years of fatherhood reduced to that. After hanging up, I stared at the computer screen. Over 3 years, I'd watched Maya transform from a loving, family-oriented young woman into someone I barely recognized. Someone who spoke in phrases that sounded more like Jason than Maya. The gradual changes became clear now. How she'd stopped Sunday dinners because Jason's family had more sophisticated gatherings. How she'd begun criticizing my clothes house lack of ambition. How she'd started using words like upgrade when talking about her future. Most telling were the little cruelties. Introducing me as just a carpenter instead of my dad. The embarrassment when her college friends visited. Canceled plans because Jason had better opportunities for her time. I'd attributed it to natural growing up. Now I saw it for what it was, a systematic campaign to isolate her from me reshaping her values until she no longer saw me as worthy of love. Jason Sterling hadn't fallen in love with my daughter by accident. He'd targeted her, studied her, learned exactly how to manipulate her insecurities. For 3 years he'd been patient, methodical, turning her against me, one comment at a time, and I'd been too blind to see it. The morning sun climbed higher over Millbrook. Somewhere across town, my daughter was planning a wedding that would be the culmination of a revenge plot 15 years in the making. But now I knew the truth. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I spent the morning reconstructing the past 3 years, laying out Jason's campaign like a detective mapping a crime. What I discovered made my blood run cold. It had started subtly. 3 weeks after that first dinner, Jason invited Maya to a charity gala. Black tie, very exclusive. When Maya asked if I wanted to see photos afterward, Jason smoothly redirected. "Your father probably wouldn't be interested in all that society stuff. Different worlds, you know. Different worlds." The first seed planted so carefully Maya hadn't noticed. Then came subtle comparisons. Jason would mention his late father's accomplishments, buildings Paul Sterling had constructed, the business empire he'd built. Always followed by questions about my work. "Your dad's a carpenter, right?" "That's honest work. Not everyone can build something that lasts." Each comment designed to make Maya see me as small, limited, temporary. Someone whose life's work could be dismissed with a single loaded pause. The manipulation escalated gradually. Jason scheduled elaborate dates during our traditional father-daughter time. Wine tastings during Sunday dinners. Weekend getaways during holidays we'd always spent together. You can't stay tied to childhood routines forever, Maya. Successful people learn to prioritize. I remembered our canceled camping trip, something we'd done every summer since she was 8. Jason had planned a Hamptons weekend with his business associates. "Dad will understand," Maya had told me. "Jason says it's important for my future to make the right connections." Even then, I'd been proud of her ambition. I'd had no idea I was being systematically erased. The most insidious part was how Jason weaponized Maya's love for me against our relationship. He never directly criticized me. That would have triggered her loyalty. Instead, he expressed concern. "I worry about your father living alone. Maybe it's time he found hobbies made friends his own age. It's not healthy for him to depend on you so much." Depend on her. as if my love was weakness rather than devotion. He'd convinced her that distance was kindness, that growing away from me was maturity. Every canceled dinner, every shortened phone call, Jason framed it all as Maya's personal evolution. The cruelest stroke had been the engagement itself. Jason proposed on Anne's birthday, a date that held sacred meaning for Maya and me. We'd always spent that day together visiting Anne's grave, but Jason turned it into something else. I wanted to propose on a day that represented new beginnings. Your mother would want you to be happy. He'd stolen even that from us, transforming our remembrance into his triumph. Now I understood next week's wedding wasn't a celebration of love. It was Jason's final victory. The son of the man who'd tried to steal my wife was going to steal my daughter instead, publicly ensuring my humiliation was complete. The wedding would be his revenge for whatever grievances his father had filled his head with. Paul Sterling had failed to destroy my marriage, so his son would destroy my relationship with my daughter. For 3 years I'd watched Maya slip away, attributing it to natural growth. I'd been so proud of her success, so happy she'd found love, that I'd never questioned why that love required her to diminish me. But Jason had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated a father's love and determination to protect his child. The grandfather clock chimed noon. In less than a week, Maya would walk down that aisle believing she was choosing her future. She had no idea she was simply the final piece in a revenge plot 15 years in the making, unless I did something to stop it. The night before Maya's wedding, I sat at my kitchen table with blank paper and a pen that felt heavier than any tool I'd ever held. Past midnight, each tick bringing my daughter closer to a marriage built on lies. What kind of father destroys his daughter's wedding? But then I remembered Jason's calculating smile, how he'd systematically turned Maya against me. This wasn't about destroying her happiness. It was about saving her from a man who saw her as a weapon in a war she didn't know existed. I began to write. To whoever reads this during Maya Mitchell's wedding ceremony, my name is Wade Mitchell, father of the bride. I am not present because my daughter believes I am unworthy of walking her down the aisle. What she doesn't know is that the man she's marrying has spent 3 years systematically destroying our relationship as part of calculated revenge. The words flowed easier once I started. Jason Sterling is the son of Paul Sterling, who had an affair with my late wife Anne 20 years ago. I discovered this through letters Anne left behind, mentioning Sterling Corporation and dreams of a different life. I chose to forgive my wife and keep this secret to protect my daughter from the pain. Even now, writing those words felt like betraying Anne's memory, but Maya deserved truth. Paul Sterling died 15 years ago, but not before filling his son's head with whatever version painted me as the villain. Jason didn't meet my daughter by accident. He sought her out, studied her, spent 3 years manipulating her emotions and turning her against me. Every canceled dinner, every missed holiday, every cruel word Maya has spoken, all part of Jason's plan to isolate her from the one person who might recognize his motives. The hardest part was explaining my love. I'm not writing from spite or jealousy. I'm writing because I love my daughter more than life itself, and I cannot watch her marry a man who sees her as nothing more than the final piece in his revenge against me. Maya deserves to know the truth, even if it comes from the father she no longer believes is good enough. I signed it Wade Mitchell, Maya's father, who loves her more than she will ever know. At dawn, I drove to St. Michael's Church. Father Andrew was preparing for morning service. Wade, I thought you wouldn't be attending. That's why I'm here, Father. I handed him the envelope. I need you to read this during the ceremony before they exchange vows. Father Andrew frowned. Wade, I can't just... Please. Read what's inside. If you think I'm a bitter man trying to ruin my daughter's happiness, throw it away. But if you believe Maya has a right to know the truth about who she's marrying, then read it when the time comes. He studied my face, then opened the envelope. I watched shock and understanding dawn in his eyes as he read. My God, Wade, are you certain about this? I've never been more certain of anything. He folded the letter carefully. I'll read it. God help us all, but I'll read it. I left the church as sun climbed higher, knowing I'd set in motion events that would either save my daughter or destroy any chance of reconciliation forever. In hours, Maya would walk down that aisle, expecting to marry the man of her dreams. Instead, she would learn the truth about a nightmare 15 years in the making. There was no going back now. I stood across from St. Michael's Church at 3 in the afternoon, hidden behind an old oak tree. The church looked like a fairy tale draped in white silk, with rose arrangements that cost more than I made in a month. Elegant cars deposited guests in designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Jason's world on full display. Successful, sophisticated, everything I could never give Maya. The church was packed with his carefully curated guest list people whose names carried weight in business circles far beyond our small Ohio town. Then I saw her. Maya emerged from the bridal car like a vision in white silk, her grandmother's pearl necklace gleaming at her throat. She was breathtakingly beautiful, every inch the perfect bride. But even from this distance I could see something in her eyes that made my heart ache. Beneath the radiant smile there was a sadness she couldn't hide. Jason appeared at her side, resplendent in his custom tuxedo, his smile confident and triumphant. He looked like a man about to claim his prize, not a groom overwhelmed by love. As he took Maya's arm, he whispered something that made her straighten her shoulders, steeling herself. The church bells chimed. My heart hammered as I watched the last guests hurry inside. Father Andrew would either save my daughter or destroy our relationship forever. Through the open doors, I saw Maya walking down the aisle, her train flowing like Silk River. Jason waited at the altar, posture perfect. Father Andrew stood between them, my letter hidden in his ceremonial robes. The music faded, and Father Andrew's voice carried clearly. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Maya Mitchell and Jason Sterling in holy matrimony. That cursed surname echoed off the church walls. Before we proceed with the vows, Father Andrew continued, voice steady, despite what must be tremendous inner turmoil, there is something that must be shared. I have received a letter containing information vital to this ceremony. A murmur rippled through the congregation. Jason's head snapped up, his confident expression flickering. Maya turned confusion evident even from my distance. Father Andrew reached into his robes and withdrew my letter, unfolding it with deliberate care. The church fell silent. This letter is from Wade Mitchell, father of the bride. The murmur grew louder. Maya's hand flew to her throat, face draining of color. Jason stepped forward to intervene, but Father Andrew had already begun reading. My name is Wade Mitchell, and I am the father of the bride. I am not present because my daughter has been led to believe I am not worthy of walking her down the aisle. My words rang out like accusations in the sacred space. Heads turned guests, whispering urgently. Maya swayed slightly, and I thought she might faint. Father Andrew continued, voice growing stronger. What she doesn't know is that the man she's about to marry has spent 3 years systematically destroying our relationship as part of calculated revenge. Whispers exploded into shocked exclamations. Several guests rose from their seats. Jason's face went white, his mask finally slipping. Maya stood frozen, bouquet trembling. Father Andrew pressed on, revealing the affair, Paul Sterling's identity, Jason's methodical manipulation. With each sentence, the atmosphere grew more electric, charged with disbelief and growing outrage. He detailed how Jason had targeted Maya, studied her weaknesses, spent 3 years turning her against me. How every canceled dinner, every cruel word, every moment of distance had been orchestrated as revenge for his father's failed affair with my wife. When he finished, the silence was deafening. Then chaos erupted. Guests shouted questions, accusations flew, and cameras flashed as people documented the scandal unfolding before them. Jason stood exposed, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of truth. All eyes turned toward the altar where Maya stood like a statue in white silk. And Jason Sterling faced the ruins of his revenge plot that had taken 15 years to execute and mere minutes to destroy. The chaos reached crescendo as Father Andrew folded the letter. Maya stood at the altar like a broken doll wedding bouquet scattered at her feet. Her face was ashen makeup, streaked with tears falling like rain on silk. "No," she whispered above the shocked voices. "This can't be true. Jason, tell them it's not true." All eyes turned to Jason Sterling, frozen beside her. The confident, polished young man was nowhere to be seen. In his place stood someone flushed with rage and humiliation, hands clenched into fists. "Jason," Maya's voice cracked with desperation, "tell them my father is lying." Jason's mask slipped completely. I saw cold calculation in his eyes, the same look his father must have worn pursuing my wife. Then he made the fatal mistake. "Your father," he said with venom, "destroyed my family. He took everything from us, and yes, I wanted him to know how it felt." The admission hung like a death sentence. Maya staggered backward, hand pressed to her heart. You used me. Everything we had was a lie." "Not all of it," Jason said hollowly. "I did love you, Maya, but I loved justice more. That's when I couldn't stay hidden. I walked through the church doors, work boots echoing on marble as hundreds of eyes turned toward me. Guests parted like the Red Sea. I only cared about my daughter. Maya, I said softly. She spun around, tear-stained face contorting with rage. You! How could you do this to me? How could you destroy my wedding, my happiness, everything I've worked for? Her words hit like physical blows, but I kept walking toward her. Don't you dare call me sweetheart. She was shaking, trembling with fury and heartbreak. You're selfish and jealous, and couldn't stand seeing me happy with someone better. Behind her, Jason was quietly gathering his things, preparing to slink away. You're right, I said quietly. I am selfish. Selfish enough to work 3 jobs for your college. Selfish enough to sit by your bedside when you had pneumonia at 15. Selfish enough to learn braiding hair because you needed a father and mother both. Maya's anger flickered, uncertainty creeping in. I was selfish enough to keep your mother's affair secret for 20 years because I didn't want you growing up knowing she'd betrayed us. And yes, selfish enough to destroy your wedding to a man who saw you as nothing more than revenge. The fight went out of her shoulders, sagging as truth settled over her. She looked back at Jason, edging toward the exit, then at me. Did you really love Mom even after... Every day until she died. And I've loved you every day since, even when you decided I wasn't good enough for your new life. Maya's face crumpled. She took one shaky step toward me, then another, and then she was in my arms, sobbing against my chest, like when she was little, and the world seemed too scary. I'm sorry, Daddy, she whispered, using the name she hadn't called me in years. I'm so sorry. I know, sweetheart, I know. Behind us, church doors slammed as Jason Sterling made his exit, leaving wreckage of his 15-year plan and the woman he'd claimed to love. Wedding guests filed out quietly, some offering awkward condolences. Father Andrew approached, face kind but weary. The church is yours as long as you need it. I held my daughter as she cried, feeling her pain as my own. Outside, Millbrook continued its quiet Saturday afternoon, unaware that in this small church, a father and daughter were finally finding their way back to each other. 6 months after the wedding that never was, I stood in my workshop on a crisp October morning, watching Maya sand the edges of a small wooden table. Her movements were careful and deliberate, so different from the impatient young woman who used to dismiss my craft as just carpentry. Like this, Dad? She asked, holding up the sandpaper. Perfect, sweetheart. Your mother would be proud. Maya smiled. A real smile, not the practiced one she'd worn during her years with Jason. She'd moved back home 3 months ago, not out of necessity, but choice. I want to remember who I am, she'd told me. I want to remember where I come from. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. Those first weeks had been difficult, filled with tears and long conversations stretching late into the night. Maya had to process not just Jason's betrayal, but her own behavior toward me. I was so angry with you for so long, she'd confessed one evening on the front porch. But I think I was really angry with myself. I knew something felt wrong with Jason, but I ignored it, because I wanted so badly to be someone different, someone better than a carpenter's daughter. You were always better, I'd told her. Not because of what you achieved, but because you were mine. The healing had been mutual. I'd confronted my own failures, how grief over Anne had consumed me, how I'd been too passive facing Maya's growing coldness. We'd both learned that love sometimes requires difficult conversations, that silence isn't always protection. Maya had quit her marketing job where Jason's influence had gotten her hired. Everything there reminded me of the person I was pretending to be. Now she worked at the community college teaching art classes to adults. She came home each day with stories about her students, eyes bright with purpose I hadn't seen in years. As for Jason Sterling, consequences had been swift. Word spread quickly through Millbrook and beyond. Business partners severed ties with Sterling Corporation after learning about his calculated manipulation. The company his father built was struggling, tarnished by association with Jason's actions. Maya had heard Jason left Ohio entirely, relocating to the West Coast. Good riddance, had been her only comment. The community's response surprised us. Instead of judgment about the dramatic church scene, we'd found support. Mrs. Henderson brought casseroles for weeks. Father Andrew visited regularly. Even Maya's genuine friends reached out. We always thought something was off about him, one confided. The hardest part had been Maya's guilt over 3 wasted years. I chose him over you, she'd said, tears streaming. I chose his lies over your love. You chose what you thought was best for your future, I'd replied. That's what children do. Grow up, make decisions. You couldn't have known his motives, but I should have trusted you. Now you do know. That's what matters. Watching her now carefully crafting something beautiful with her own hands, I felt peace I hadn't experienced in years. The table she was making was a wedding gift for her friend Ashley, a real wedding built on honesty and love rather than manipulation. You know, Maya said, setting down her sandpaper, I think I understand why you love this work. There's something honest about it. You can't fake good craftsmanship. No, I agreed. You can't fake anything that's built to last? She looked at me with eyes holding wisdom earned through pain and forgiveness. Like family. Like family, I confirmed. Outside our workshop, Millbrook was settling into autumn leaves turning gold and red. Somewhere in this small Ohio town, other families were probably struggling with their own secrets and betrayals, their own journeys toward understanding. But in this moment, surrounded by sawdust scent and quiet satisfaction of work done with love, I knew that sometimes the most painful decisions are also the most necessary ones. Sometimes protecting people we love means risking their hatred, and sometimes, if we're very lucky, the truth really can set us all free. Looking back on everything that happened, I've learned that betrayal stories like ours are more common than we think. But what makes each true story different is how we choose to respond when the truth finally comes to light. God taught me that sometimes love means making the hardest choices. When I discovered Jason's revenge plot, I could have stayed silent to avoid hurting Maya. But God showed me that protecting someone you love sometimes means risking their hatred. The Lord works in mysterious ways, and I believe He guided me to find those letters when Maya needed saving most. This true story taught me that betrayal stories don't have to end in bitterness. Maya and I could have let Jason's manipulation destroy us forever. Instead, we chose forgiveness and healing. God blessed us with a second chance that many families never get. The most important lesson, truth and love will always triumph over lies and revenge. When we trust in God's plan, even our darkest moments can lead to redemption. Betrayal stories like ours prove that family bonds, when built on honesty and genuine love, are stronger than any scheme designed to tear them apart. Sometimes being a parent means breaking your child's heart to save their soul. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but seeing Maya happy and whole again reminds me that true story endings aren't always fairy tales. Sometimes they're even better because they're real. What do you think about Wade's decision? Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone's feelings and telling them a painful truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that will touch your heart.